Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's video, I want to talk to you about BRICS. Now, I haven't tuned into the wrong channel. This isn't a house building video. I'm actually talking about the acronym BRICS, which stands for the trade agreement between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there's been a lot of talk about BRICS over the past 15 years since it was established in 2009. A lot of people have said that BRICS could become a huge trade agreement that would compete with the West. However, unfortunately for BRICS, we haven't really seen that materialise. They haven't really put together those strong relationships. And that's despite the fact that over the past 2.5 years, Russia has become much closer to India and China, which are the two largest countries in the world in terms of population. And in terms of when you take a step back and look at BRICS, it does have some really good potential because it covers around 30% of the total land mass, around 45% of the population, and about 27% of 2024's global GDP. So the potential is there, but it's not really happening so far. And earlier this year, the Brazil president actually made a call for BRICS to create their own currency to compete with the US dollar. He was sick of having to do all of his petrochemical deals in dollars, and so they wanted to create a new currency to move away from that. But the other countries in BRICS actually pushed back against that. They said they didn't want to form a new currency, but what they did want to do is start using their own currencies rather than the US dollar. And earlier this year, 4 more countries were actually added to the BRICS agreement. They were Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. So it is growing in terms of the number of countries. However, interestingly, Argentina were lined up to join. The previous president wanted to join BRICS. However, since Javier Milei took over, he decided that he didn't want to be involved at all, so Argentina have now withdrawn. And Saudi Arabia were also due to join, but they've delayed that entry, and it's not sure whether or not they will definitely sign up. And in this video, what I wanted to do is have a look at what's been happening with the 5 main currencies, the 5 BRICS currencies, over the course of the last 12 months to see whether or not those countries have achieved their goal of increasing the value of their currencies or whether they haven't. In terms of looking at the global importance of the BRICS countries, I thought it was worth having a look at the GDP figures for 2024. You can see that China is actually the second largest economy in the world, with forecast GDP of over $18.5 trillion for 2024, and that compares to $28.8 trillion for the USA. So you can see that whilst China is number 2, it's significantly smaller than the USA. However, it's significantly larger than the third country, Germany, which has GDP of $4.6 trillion. India comes in at number 5, so is the second largest BRICS country, with estimated GDP for 2024 of $3.94 trillion. Brazil is actually the third largest BRICS country and ranks at number 8 in global GDP terms with $2.33 trillion for 2024. Russia is the 4th largest BRICS country and ranks at number 11 globally with just over $2 trillion in 24. And South Africa is the smallest of the 5 original BRICS countries, ranking at number 41 globally with GDP of $373 billion US. And in terms of the 4 new countries that have joined BRICS recently, the United Arab Emirates is the largest of these 4, ranking at number 30 globally for GDP with $527 billion. Iran is the next largest, ranking at 35 globally with $464 billion of GDP. Egypt is the next largest and ranks at number 43 globally with $347 billion of GDP. And Ethiopia is the smallest of all the enlarged BRICS countries, ranking at number 57 globally with $205 billion of GDP. This chart shows the movement in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Brazilian real over the past 12 months. And what this shows is that this time last year, 1 US dollar was trading for 4.85 Brazilian real. However, today it's trading for 6.08, which represents a fall over the past 12 months in the value of the real of 25%. And obviously that wasn't the goal that the Brazilian president was looking for when he came out and said that the BRICS countries needed to create their own currency to counter what was happening with the dollar. He was looking for the value of the real to actually be increasing. However, over the last 12 months, there has been a significant fall in the value. This chart shows the movement in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Russian ruble over the past 12 months. And regular viewers of the channel will be familiar with the shape of this chart. And what it shows is that this time last year, one US dollar was trading for 92 rubles. Today, it's trading for 103, which represents a fall in value of more than 12% over the last 12 months. And if you look at what's been happening over the past 4 months, you can see that the fall in value of the ruble has actually been more severe than that. At the end of September, the ruble had actually traded up to around 85 against one US dollar. So over the past 4 months, the ruble has fallen in value by more than 21%. And at the end of November, there was actually a run on the currency when the value started crashing, and it got down to around 115 against the US dollar. And at that point, Russia stepped in, closed the market for the ruble. And so what we're seeing at the moment is a very narrow market. And it'll be really interesting to see in the new year, if Russia releases those restrictions, what the value trades down to. This chart shows the movement in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Indian rupee over the last 12 months. And what this shows is that 12 months ago, one US dollar was trading for 83.1 rupees. Today, it's trading for 84.9, which represents a fall over the last year of more than 22%. And over the last 12 months, India actually overtook the UK to become the 5th largest economy in the world. So the economy is doing well, but despite that, the value of the rupee is falling. And that's predominantly because a lot of the countries that are trading with India, including China and Russia, don't want to use the rupee as the currency. They would rather use either their own currencies or the US dollar. And so demand for the rupee hasn't been rising and the value has been falling. This chart shows the movement in the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Chinese yuan. And what this shows is that 12 months ago, one US dollar was trading for 7.14 yuan. Today, it's trading for 7.29, which represents a fall of around 2%. However, if you look at what's been happening in the past 3 months, you can see that prior to that period, the value of the yuan actually strengthened. And by the end of September, one US dollar was trading for 6.98 yuan. However, over the past 4 months, the value of the yuan has fallen by more than 4%. And finally, this chart shows the exchange rate between the US dollar and the South African rand over the last 12 months. And what this shows is that 12 months ago, one US dollar was trading for 18.4 rand. Today, it's trading for 18.3. So year on year, there's been very little movement. However, you can see in the first 9 months of this period, the rand actually strengthened against the US dollar. And at one point, one US dollar was trading for 17 rand. However, over the past 3 months, we've seen a deterioration in the value of the rand back to the level where it was this time last year. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because there's been a lot of talk about BRICS becoming a major player, competing against the West, particularly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, now that Russia is much closer to India and China than it was before the war started. So I wanted to talk about how BRICS has developed, whether or not we're seeing those 5 leading nations, whether we're seeing their currencies strengthening as their economies get bigger, or if we haven't seen that. And what we've seen from today's data is that over the past 12 months, the biggest economies in BRICS have seen the value of their currency falling. The Chinese yuan is down around 2% against the US dollar. However, over the past 3 months, it's actually down by more than 4%. Russia has seen the value of its currency fall by more than 12% over the 12 months. But in the past 4 months, it's down by significantly more than that. India has seen a fall of more than 20%, and the Brazilian real is down by more than 25%. And the only currency that's really kept its value has been the South African rand. However, over the past few months, we've seen a deterioration in the value of that currency also. And I think what this tells us is that the objective that's been set out by the BRICS nations of actually building their own currencies to compete with the US dollar hasn't been achieved. We haven't seen those currencies strengthening. And I think what that tells us is that there are problems in a lot of those economies. We've talked about this in many previous videos, but the strength of your currency usually has a direct link to the value of your economy. If your economy is doing well, if it's booming, then a lot of countries will want to deal with you. Therefore, there's demand for your currency and the value usually goes up. But if the opposite is happening, then the value goes down. And what we've seen from today's data is that overall, the value of the BRICS currencies is falling against the US dollar. And this tells us that the BRICS alliance isn't really taking off. We haven't seen a major strengthening of that trade agreement. We're not seeing a lot more trade happening between all of those different nations. We have seen a lot more trade happening between Russia and India and China. But unfortunately, from Russia's point of view, that trade hasn't been in addition to the previous trade that they were doing, it's been in replacement. Russia has lost a lot of the business that it was doing with Europe and the West, and so it's had to replace that with deals with India and China. And overall, a lot of those deals have been at a lower value because Russia has had to offer a discount to India and China to encourage them to take larger volumes. So the overall summary of today's video is that the BRICS nations continue to work on their trade agreement. They're having regular meetings, and they've actually added 4 more countries to the BRICS alliance. However, the data that we've seen in today's video tells us that the currencies for those nations are weakening against the US dollar. They're not strengthening. And so the BRICS alliance isn't really delivering yet in terms of that increase in the trade that they're trying to achieve. And so there is a major question mark as to whether or not the BRICS alliance will actually ever grow to be a major force to compete with the West. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.